The date on the calendar hanging by a rusty nail says December, or perhaps it is January. I am not sure anymore. Down here, in the basement of what used to be the Red October tractor factory, time has ceased to exist in hours or minutes. It exists only in the rhythm of the artillery shells hammering the frozen earth above our heads. Thud, thud, thud. It is like the heartbeat of a dying giant. Every time a shell lands, dust trickles down from the cracked concrete ceiling, settling into our hair, into our food, and into the open wounds of the men lying on the floor. My name is Erich. Before the world went mad, I was a surgeon in Hamburg. I had a study with oak paneling. I had clean white sheets. I had the smell of pipe tobacco and Sunday roast. Now, I am a mole living in a hole in the ground. I look at my hands in the flickering light of a kerosene lamp. They are trembling. They are coated in a layer of grime, oil, and dried blood that has turned black, like tar. These hands used to play the piano. Now they are the hands of a butcher. It is cold. God, you cannot imagine this cold, unless you have felt it inside your own marrow. Outside, the wind howls across the steppe at 30 degrees below zero. But inside, it is barely warmer. The frost is a living thing here. It coats the walls like white mold. It crawls under my field gray uniform, through the wool of my sweater, biting into my skin. My breath creates clouds of steam that freeze instantly on my mustache. The ether we use for anesthesia, when we have it, freezes in the mask. The blood on the floor does not puddle. It turns into a slippery red ice rink. We have to scatter sand on the floor just to keep our footing while we operate. Doctor, a voice whispers from the shadows. I turn. It is my orderly, Kurt. He is a boy of 19, but his face is gray and lined like an old man's. His eyes are hollow. We are all hollow men now. The generator is dead, Doctor, Kurt says. No more fuel. I nod. I expected this. Light the candles, I said. My voice sounds strange to my ears, scratchy, like dry leaves. And bring the car headlights. We have work to do. We operate by the light of tallow candles and headlights salvaged from destroyed trucks. The shadows dance on the walls, stretching and twisting like ghosts. The smell in this basement is thick enough to chew. It is a sweet, cloying scent that sticks to the back of your throat. It is the smell of gangrene, the smell of unwashed bodies packed together like sardines, the smell of fear. I walk to the operating table. It is just a wooden door laid across two ammunition crates. On it lies a soldier. He is conscious. We ran out of morphine 3 days ago. Now, pain is the only reality these men know. What is your name, son? I ask, wiping my fogged glasses with a dirty rag. Fritz, he gasps. Fritz Muller, from Dresden. Well, Fritz, I say, picking up a scalpel. The metal burns my fingers with its coldness. You have a piece of Russian steel in your leg. We are going to take it out. It will hurt. I am sorry. He nods. He is biting on a leather strap. It is a thick piece of belt leather, chewed through by a dozen men before him. I begin. I will not describe the sound of a saw cutting through bone in a silent room. It is a sound that vibrates in your teeth. It creates a dust that you taste. Fritz screams. It is a muffled, animal sound behind the leather strap. I try to work faster. My hands are slippery. The light flickers. Every second feels like an hour. I have to detach myself. I cannot think of him as Fritz from Dresden. I cannot think of his mother waiting for a letter. If I think of them as men, I will break. So I think of them as machines that need repair. Tighten this artery. Stitch this flap of skin. Saw this bone. When it is over, Fritz has passed out from the shock. It is a blessing. We lift him off the table and lay him on the straw in the corner. Next, I say. There is always a next. The line of stretchers stretches out the door, into the snow, into the night. I step back into the shadows for a moment of respite. I lean against the freezing wall and try to light a cigarette. My matches are damp. I strike 1, 2, 3 times. Finally, a small flame. I inhale the harsh smoke. It is the only thing that masks the smell of rotting flesh. I close my eyes. I try to summon a memory of home. I try to remember the color of my wife's dress. Blue? Was it blue or green? The memory is fading, eaten away by the gray reality of Stalingrad. Here, we are not heroes. The radio in Berlin plays Wagner and talks of strategic defense. But here, in the blood and the ice, we know the truth. We are not an army anymore. We are a sacrifice. We are waiting to die. And the only question that remains is, will the cold take us first, or the Russians? Hope is a dangerous thing in Stalingrad. It is more dangerous than typhus, more lethal than a sniper's bullet. Typhus kills you slowly, a bullet kills you instantly. But hope? Hope lifts you up just high enough so that the fall breaks every bone in your body. For days, a rumor had been circulating through the subterranean corridors of our hospital. Rumors here travel faster than orders. They are whispered from stretcher to stretcher, passed like a secret currency. Manstein is coming, the whispers said. The panzer divisions have broken through. A supply column is miles away. We wanted to believe it. God, how we wanted to believe it. We are men of science, doctors, and rational thinkers. But in this pit, we became superstitious children. We looked for signs in the cracks of the ceiling. Then, late one afternoon, we heard it. It wasn't the grinding roar of tank tracks, nor the whistle of a dive bomber. It was the heavy, rhythmic chugging of a diesel engine. A truck, an Opel Blitz. It was close. The atmosphere in the basement changed instantly. Men who had not moved for days, men whose legs were black with frostbite, began to drag themselves across the concrete floor. They clawed at the frozen dirt with their fingernails, pulling their broken bodies towards the heavy iron doors at the entrance. "Morphine," my assistant Kurt whispered. His eyes were wide, shining in the gloom. "Doctor, they must have brought morphine. And bandages, real cotton bandages." I stood up, wiping my bloody hands on my tunic. My heart was hammering against my ribs. If they brought plasma, I could save the boy in the corner. If they brought food, even just hardtack biscuits, we could stop the orderlies from fainting during surgery. The great iron doors groaned open. A blast of snow swirled into the room, a white vortex that extinguished half the candles. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in a second. Through the white haze, a figure appeared. It was the quartermaster, a man named Schultz. He was wrapped in 3 coats, looking like a bear covered in snow. Behind him, 4 soldiers struggled with the weight of heavy wooden crates. "Make way!" Schultz shouted, his voice hoarse. "Make way for the supplies!" A cheer went up. It was a weak, ragged sound, like the coughing of sick lungs. But it was a cheer. Tears streamed down the dirty faces of the soldiers. They reached out their hands, touching the wood of the crates as if it were a holy relic. They set the crates down in the center of the triage area. The wood was fresh, pale pine, stark against the filth of our dungeon. "Open it!" someone screamed. "Open it!" Schultz took a crowbar. He jammed it under the lid of the first crate. He grunted with effort. The wood screeched, a high-pitched sound that set my teeth on edge. With a loud crack, the lid flew off. We all leaned forward. The candlelight flickered on the contents. I expected to see the brown glass bottles of medicine. I expected to see the white packages of gauze. I expected to see loaves of bread. I blinked. My brain could not process what I was seeing. The crate was filled with metal. Thousands of iron crosses, second class, first class. Knight's crosses with oak leaves. They shimmered in the dim light, black iron and silver trim, resting on beds of soft black velvet. Silence. A silence so heavy, so absolute, that it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "Where's the morphine?" Kurt asked. His voice was trembling. "Where's the food?" Schultz did not answer. He looked at his boots. He moved to the second crate and pried it open. Paper. Stacks and stacks of glossy paper. I walked forward and picked one up. It was a Christmas card. On the front, a picture of a candle burning in a window, framed by pine branches, beautifully printed. Inside, in elegant Gothic script, "To the defenders of Stalingrad, the Führer and the fatherland are with you." I looked at the card. Then I looked at the men around me. Men with missing limbs, men with hollow cheeks, men who were rotting alive. "They sent us paper?" I whispered. A sound broke the silence. It started as a giggle, then it grew. It was a high-pitched, jagged sound. One of the soldiers, a man with a bandaged head, was laughing. He crawled forward, grabbed a handful of iron crosses, and threw them into the air. They clattered onto the concrete floor like cheap coins. Cling, clang, cling. "We are saved!" the soldier screamed, laughing hysterically. "We can eat the medals. We can stitch our wounds with the ribbon. Look, a cross for you, a cross for me, a cross for the corpse over there." Panic erupted. Not a panic of fear, but of madness. Men started weeping. Some threw the cards into the fire of the stove, watching the Führer's greetings turn to ash. I stood there, holding the medal in my freezing hand. It was heavy, cold, useless. That was the moment the Sixth Army truly died. We didn't die when the Russians surrounded us. We died when we opened that crate. Berlin didn't send us supplies to help us live. They sent us medals to help us die gloriously. They were already writing our obituary. We were ghosts to them. I let the medal drop from my fingers. It hit the floor with a dull thud. I turned back to the operating table, where the boy was still waiting for morphine that would never come. "Kurt," I said, my voice dead, "get the saw. We do it without the drugs." The medals were still scattered on the floor, kicking around under our boots like debris, when the war came knocking at the door again. The artillery barrage had shifted. For weeks, it had been a distant rumble, a thunder on the horizon. Now, it was close. The shockwave shook dust from the ceiling beams. We could hear the rattle of small arms fire, the distinct, rapid pap-pap-pap of Russian submachine guns. The front line was collapsing. The cauldron was shrinking. The heavy iron doors banged open. A blast of wind, colder than death, swept through the triage room. 4 soldiers stumbled in. They were carrying a stretcher, slipping on the bloody ice. They didn't place it down gently. They dropped it with a heavy thud. "Doctor!" a sergeant barked. His face was wrapped in a scarf, his eyes rimmed with red soot. "Intelligence wants this one alive. Patch him up, but don't use the good supplies." I walked over, stepping over the iron crosses that littered the floor. I looked down at the stretcher. The uniform was not field gray. It was a dirty, padded khaki jacket. The boots were felt, not leather. A Russian. He was young. They are always so young. He couldn't have been more than 20. A boy with high cheekbones and wheat-colored hair matted with blood. He had taken a piece of shrapnel in the shoulder. He was conscious, his chest heaving, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. He knew where he was. He was in the belly of the beast. I reached for my scissors to cut away his tunic. "Wait," the sergeant stepped in front of me. He put a hand on my chest. I said, "Don't use the good supplies. He is Ivan. He is the one killing us. Save the bandages for our boys." I looked at the sergeant, then at the rows of German soldiers dying on the floor. Then I looked at the Russian boy. He was gripping the side of the stretcher so hard his knuckles were white. He was terrified. "Sergeant," I said, my voice quiet but hard, "get out of my way." "He is the enemy," the sergeant shouted. Spittle flew from his lips. "In this room," I replied, pushing his hand away, "there are no enemies. There are only broken bodies, and I am the mechanic." The sergeant stared at me with pure hatred. For a second, I thought he might shoot me. His hand drifted to the holster at his belt. The room went silent. Even the wounded stopped groaning to watch. Finally, he spat on the floor, right next to my shoe, and stormed out into the night. I turned back to the Russian. He flinched as I touched him. He thought I was going to hurt him. "Easy," I whispered in German, though I knew he couldn't understand. "Easy, son." I cut open the thick padded jacket. The smell hit me. It was different from the smell of our soldiers. It smelled of unfamiliar tobacco and rough wool. But underneath the blood smelled the same. The muscle tore the same way. The bone shattered the same way. I worked quickly. I dug out the jagged piece of steel. I cleaned the wound with the last of our alcohol. I stitched him up with catgut. He watched my face the entire time. He didn't make a sound, no screaming, just that intense, unblinking stare. Later that night, the shelling stopped for an hour, a rare moment of silence. I sat on a crate next to the Russian stretcher. I was exhausted. My hands were shaking so bad I had to clasp them together. The Russian boy moved. He reached into the pocket of his torn tunic. I stiffened. Did he have a knife? Slowly, carefully, he pulled out a small, crumpled piece of paper. He held it out to me. I took it. It was a black and white photograph. A girl standing in a field of sunflowers. She was smiling, shielding her eyes from the sun. She looked happy. The Russian pointed to the photo, then to his chest. "Maria," he whispered. I looked at him. The hatred, the propaganda, the fear, it all evaporated in that damp, freezing basement. I reached into my own tunic. My wallet was worn leather. I pulled out the picture of my wife and my son, Hans. They were standing in our garden in Hamburg, under the cherry tree. I held it out to him. He took it with his dirty, blood-stained fingers. He looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at me. He nodded. "Hans," I said, pointing to the boy. "Hans," he repeated. His accent was thick, clumsy. He pointed to himself. "Nikolai, Erich," I said. We sat there in the silence, two men from opposite ends of the earth, brought together to kill each other. But in the dim light of a dying candle, we weren't soldiers. We were just two fathers, two husbands, showing each other the reasons why we wanted to survive. For a moment, the war outside didn't exist. There was no Führer, no Stalin, just Erich and Nikolai, and the freezing cold that was trying to kill us both. The tractor factory fell on a Tuesday. I remember it was Tuesday because that was the day we ate the last of the horse meat. We retreated under the cover of a blizzard, a column of ghosts marching through a skeleton city. We left the seriously wounded behind. There was no transport, no sleds, no fuel. I can still hear their voices calling out to us as we walked away into the white void. "Don't leave us, brothers! Don't leave us!" But we walked on. To stop meant to freeze. To stop meant to die. We established our final sanctuary in the basement of the Univermag department store in the center of the city. Before the war, this was a place of luxury. Ladies in fur coats bought French perfumes and silk stockings here. Now, it is the waiting room for the grave. The basement is a labyrinth of concrete corridors, packed so tight with bodies that you cannot walk without stepping on a hand or a face. The air is foul. There is no ventilation. It is a toxic soup of unwashed sweat, excrement, and the sickly sweet rot of gangrene. We breathe the dead. I have stopped operating. There is no point. I have no bandages, no thread, no alcohol. My scalpel is dull. Now I am no longer a surgeon. I am merely a witness. I walk the corridors, checking for pulses. If a man is dead, we drag him to the stack by the door. If he is alive, we give him a sip of melted snow water. That is all the medicine I have left. Hunger has become a madness. It is not just an emptiness in the stomach. It is a voice in your head that never stops screaming. We have eaten the horses. We have eaten the dogs. Now, men are boiling their leather belts and boot tongues, chewing on the tough cowhide just to trick their stomachs. Yesterday, I saw a major, a man with an aristocratic name, on his hands and knees, hunting for rats in the corner. He caught one. He didn't cook it. He didn't even kill it first. I turned away. We have descended past humanity. We are animals now. But the cruelest torture was yet to come. It came from the sky. One of the last Heinkel transport planes managed to fly over the cauldron before turning back to the safety of the West. It didn't drop bombs. It dropped sacks, mail. The sacks were dragged into the basement. The distribution was chaotic. Men with frostbitten fingers clawed at the canvas bags, weeping. Is there one for me? Is there one for me? A soldier handed me an envelope. It was white, stark, blindingly white against the filth of my gloves. I looked at the handwriting, elegant loops of blue ink, my wife's handwriting. I sat down on a crate of ammunition. My hands shook so violently I could barely tear the paper. As I opened it, a scent drifted up, lavender. She had sprayed the paper with her perfume. The smell hit me like a physical blow. It was the smell of clean sheets, the smell of Sunday mornings, the smell of a world that no longer existed. I began to read. "My dearest Erich," it began. "The winter here in Hamburg has been mild. The cherry trees are confusing the season. I think they might bloom early." I laughed, a dry, cracking sound in my throat. Cherry trees. Little Hans received an A in his mathematics exam. He was so proud. He asks every day when Papa is coming home to see it. We listen to the radio every night. Goebbels speaks of the heroic defensive battles. "We know you are winning. We are knitting socks for you, though I hope you are warm enough in your bunker." I stopped reading. I looked up at the ceiling of the basement, where condensation dripped like slow tears. She thought I was warm. She thought I was a hero in a bunker. She didn't know I was a rat in a sewer. The letter continued. "I bought new curtains for the study, blue velvet. You will love them. Please, come home soon. The war must be over by spring." Blue velvet curtains. I looked at the man next to me. He was dead. He had died quietly while I was reading. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. He had no boots. His feet were black blocks of ice. I felt a scream building in my chest. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was a scream of absurdity. The distance between that letter and this reality was too great. My wife lived on another planet. a planet of mathematics exams and cherry trees. I lived on the planet of the dead. I carefully folded the letter. I put it in my breast pocket, next to the photo of Hans. I couldn't finish it. It hurt too much. The paper felt like it was burning a hole through my chest. "Doctor," a voice called. "Water, please." I stood up. The lavender scent faded, replaced instantly by the stench of rot. "Coming," I said. I took the metal cup and dipped it into the bucket of gray slush. The letter stayed in my pocket. I would never read the rest. I couldn't bear to know about the curtains. Not here, not at the end of the world. The end of the world did not come with a scream. It did not come with a final, glorious charge. It came with silence. For 160 days, the noise had been our constant companion. The roar of the diving Stukas, the grinding of tank tracks, the chatter of machine guns, the screams of the dying. The noise was the air we breathed. And then, at 7 a.m. on January 31st, it stopped. The silence was sudden and absolute. It was physically painful. My ears, accustomed to the constant pressure of explosions, began to ring. I looked up from the floor. The other men in the basement were looking around, confused, terrified. The dust from the ceiling stopped falling. The ground stopped shaking. "Is it over?" Kurt whispered. He was huddled in the corner, clutching a rifle with no ammunition. I didn't answer. I stood up. My knees cracked. I adjusted my filthy tunic. I wiped the blood from my glasses. If this was the end, I would meet it standing up. I was a doctor, not a rat. I walked towards the staircase that led up to the street level. The sound of footsteps crunched on the broken glass above. Heavy boots, slow, deliberate, not the hurried steps of men running for cover, the steps of men who owned the ground they walked on. A shadow fell across the stairwell. A figure appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the blinding white light of the winter morning. A soldier. He wore a quilted jacket and a fur hat with a red star. He held a submachine gun, the barrel pointing down at my chest. I stopped. I did not raise my hands. I was too tired to surrender, too empty to fight. I simply looked at him. He stepped down into the gloom. He was young. His face was weathered by the wind, his eyes hard. He looked at my bloody white coat. He looked at the rows of wounded men behind me. He smelled the stench of our defeat. He raised the gun slightly. I closed my eyes. I thought of Hamburg. I thought of the blue velvet curtains. I waited for the flash, but it didn't come. "Calm," he said. It was a rough, guttural sound. Calm. He lowered the weapon. He didn't shoot. He gestured with his head towards the exit. I opened my eyes. I realized then that he wasn't looking at me with hatred. He was looking at me with something worse. He was looking at me with pity. To him, I wasn't a monster of the right. I was just a broken old man in a dirty coat. I turned to my men. "It's over," I said. "Help those who can walk." We shuffled up the stairs, a procession of ghosts emerging from the underworld. When I stepped out into the street, I had to shield my eyes. The light was blinding. The air was crisp and painfully cold, but it was clean. It didn't smell of gangrene. It smelled of snow and smoke. I looked at the city. Stalingrad was gone. It was a skeleton. The buildings were jagged teeth sticking out of the blackened snow. Not a single wall was left standing intact. It was a moonscape of craters and twisted metal, and over it all, a strange, unnatural peace. Thousands of German soldiers were already climbing out of the cellars and bunkers, a river of field gray greatcoats flowing slowly towards the east. We were no longer the 6th Army. We were a herd of cattle. I joined the column. I didn't look back at the Univermont. I didn't look back at the boys we had to leave behind because they couldn't stand. I just put one foot in front of the other. The Russian guards walked beside us. They offered cigarettes to some. They took watches from others. But mostly, they just watched us walk. I put my hand on my chest pocket. I could feel the crinkle of the letter about the cherry trees. I knew, with a cold certainty, that I would never see those trees. I knew that Siberia was waiting. I knew that most of us walking in this line would never return. We were the walking dead. But as the wind hit my face, I realized something else. I was breathing. My heart was beating. Against all odds, against all logic, I was still here. War does not determine who is right. War only determines who is left. I am Dr. Erich. I am a surgeon who could not save his army. I am a father who may never see his son. But today, the guns are silent. Today, I am alive. And in this white hell, that is the only victory that matters. I keep walking. Into the white, into the silence.